So I'm going to open up last time's page transition, okay, just so you can see where we left off last time. And you remember we did this last week, right? So we did this little flipper thing, and then we took that flipper thing and we added it into a big one like this, okay? Now again, that could be used individually. It could be used as one transition just to go to a solid color, or it could be used as a half transition to go to, or a full transition to go to a different color or back to the original color. Okay, even when it's like here, you know, this entire screen is full, I could actually put in a brand new solid underneath. And just for the sake of it, we'll just make it red. I'll drop it way underneath. And I'll slide this over so it starts right here. So when this red bar gets lit up, so when we are here, the red doesn't exist. Once all these are there and it gets to the red, now it's there, and so now it changes to a different color, okay? So different things like that you can do to this particular assignment. All right, so what I want to show today, I'm going to make a new composition. If you remember, you have your cheat sheet, so you can always reference your cheat sheet for the settings. I'm just going to leave it the way it is for now. I want to show a different way to do this. So far we've always gone to new solid, okay? And new solid, what it does is it just creates a rectangle or a square, depending on how you shape it, that you can use. If I go here though, these are called shapes. And the shapes actually have a lot more options and a lot more ability to create some pretty interesting looking transitions. So if I go to ellipse, okay, and then I click and drag, this creates an ellipse, all right? Now by default, it doesn't center it, it doesn't do anything nice. So let's say I created a circle right here, and then I tried to scale the circle. You can see that it's gonna scale from like off to the side, and that looks kind of weird, okay? So what I typically do is I double click it, and that creates a full ellipse right centered in the middle of this. However big my object is, that's how big the ellipse comes out. Now if I use the triangle here and I start cascading this down, I'll get more options, okay? So on a regular solid, just so you can see the difference, if I open this one up, I only have a transform block. On the shape layer, I get a contents and I get a transform. And the contents is where basically all the magic is going to happen. So on this contents, there's an ellipse. And if I keep going down, I get there's an ellipse path, and then here's the size of it, okay? So if I want this ellipse to be a full-grown regular size circle, I need to uncheck this little chain and then type in the same number for each thing. So if this is 540, then that has to be 540. That way they both fit, okay? Now there's also up top, here's how I can pick the color. So instead of doing the Control-Shift-Y and picking a color, I can just go here and I can pick a different color, and you can see how it like live updates where the other one really wasn't live updating like this one. Okay, so let's say I went with that. Cool. There's also a stroke, so I can change the color of the stroke. I can also click and drag on that too and make the stroke bigger, which is kind of a neat way to do that. I'm going to do a different kind of transition here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the size and link it back up so that they stay together. Shrink this down to, say, like that. There we go. So whatever. I double click that, but don't try to follow along now. Just take notes now, and then you could follow along after. So I have whatever size my my stroke was here. That's the same size I make this, and it just works out better. If I tried to go bigger, you'll see there's a tiny hole here. If I try to go smaller, what happens is, smaller, what'll happen is the stroke will actually pop through this side, okay? So it actually looks kind of weird. So 61 and 61, perfect digits, wonderful, okay? So now here's where the cool part of this is that I can create basically like a radial wipe of this thing underneath this. It's pretty awesome. So if I go to, not there, there. if I close these for a second and I go to this add, here's a whole bunch of other stuff that I can add to the shape layer. And that's what really makes this shape layer kind of better than a traditional solid, because there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do to it. Like I could, if I wanted to make this a star or add a star to this, I want to go to this one called Trim Paths. And you'll see that when I go to Trim Paths, it adds this Trim Path node here. And if I open that up, I get this. This is the cool thing. Look at how awesome that is. Now, if I don't want that purple to be there, I can just click right on the word fill, and I can just set the color to none. And now there's no fill. Okay. So now here's what I was talking about before with the size of these mattering. If I go too big, look what happens there. See how they get that weird like thing happening? That's why it has to be exactly the same numbers, 61 and 61. So don't get that weird thing. Cool. So now instead of setting keyframes on stuff like scale or position, I can set keyframes right on this trim path end. And then I'll be able to do this like little swipey thing to create a pretty cool transition. Okay. So I'm going to hit the end keyframe off here. I'm going to go up a bit, like let's say 10 frames. I'll set it to 100. And now I have that. Okay, not terribly exciting. Whoop. There we go. Okay. But then we'll make it exciting. We'll go to our Easy Ease. We'll click on the graph editor. We'll make sure we're on speed graph, which we are. We'll frame it. And I want that to go pretty quick. So a little bit slower at the beginning and then fast at the end. Let's try that. That's cool. Yep, awesome. Okay, so much more exciting than we had a second ago. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing that we did before. So I'm just going to take this and duplicate it. And then I'm going to duplicate it 5 times. And then I'm going to take the bottomest one, and I'm going to, the bottomest one? I don't know, I can do either way. Yeah, we'll just try the bottom one first. We'll go to where they're all big, and I just want to scale this up, okay? There we go. So that one fills the entire screen. I'll go to this one, and I'll scale it up to, like, that's 948, so I'll scale it up to less than 948. So maybe like there. I'll go to the next one, scale it up less. Go to the next one, scale it up less. There we go. Okay. And then I can give each of these kind of a different color, too. So that one's kind of pinky. This one's kind of darker pinky. That one's that color, and then this one will be like a black. Okay, so now if I just play it, it'll do this. Okay, not terribly exciting, but then when I take these and offset them, oops, that's too much offset. Let's pull it back a little bit. Too little there. There we go. Okay, we get these pretty neat looking patterns that we could use. So I could take this little pattern that I have here of this transition, and then I could use that as kind of like a starting point, and then I could take shape layer 5, which is the tiniest little guy here, and then I could scale him up at the end. So now we're actually like stacking our transitions on top of each other. Do the same thing with the Easy Ease, same thing here. Oops. There we go. So now we have this like neat transition and it kind of fills the screen. We'll put a motion blur on too. You'll see it's actually, oops, a little bit a bit better having motion blur on this, especially with the fast motion. Okay, so it's really cool how we get that kind of transition on there. Now we could also take this a step further and maybe reverse their order. So let's say I put this in opposite order. So if the biggest one goes first, obviously we're not going to see anything right there. So I have to also switch their order that they come out. There we go. So now we kind of have it like the white is wiping on, then the other one wipes on top of that, then the other one, then the other one, then the black. Okay, so it's a different way that we can, again, kind of attack this kind of assignment. Okay, now that's one way that we could use that specific one. Let me rename this one to be my shape layer circles. Okay, so let me make a new composition again, and I'll make another new solid. This time I'll use a rectangle. I'll double click it so it fills the entire screen. And realistically, I want to fill the screen, but I'm mostly getting it so that it's centered. Because if I do just drag it, the center point is like way off. So I don't want to have that. Mm-hmm. You double click it. It should fill the whole box. I'll check it out after. Okay. Now there's also some other stuff, like instead of this just being like square like this, you'll see there's also like rounded corners. So you can actually create like little rounded corners in here, which is, again, kind of a neat way to transition that. There's also stuff here is trim. There you go. There's trim path right here, which is the one we used. So I'm going to use a couple different things. So let's try this one first. Yeah, we'll just throw trim path on there. And this time I want to have a fill on it, and this time I don't want a stroke on it, so I'll turn the stroke off. Okay, so you can see how we can actually kind of fill in the screen this way. And let me scale it up just a smidge more. Okay, so this time I'm going to fill the entire screen. Okay, so remember that one that we did before, which was like a rotation one? So this one gives us something very similar to that rotation one, just by animating this endpoint. Okay, so I'm going to do the same kind of thing here. I'm going to wipe it back. I'm going to hit the end up a little bit, hold it up. Okay, cool. Then I can also throw on here a repeater. And what the repeater does is it like repeats the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to scale it down a little bit just so we can see it. But now look how we have like 3 copies here. And then we can take these offsets, oops, and change where they're at. Oops. And then under the transform repeater, you can see that the positions right now are right here. So if I go and scoot this over, see how it scooted it over that way? Let's just take this offset to 0 for now. And there we go. Cool. So I'm basically like duplicating this thing over and over again, and then I end up with this kind of like bigger image than just that one. And I can also bring it up in this direction too. So let's say I just moved it down to that corner. I could even change the opacity on these so that my start opacity and my end opacity are different. And I could even do my scale so that my start of the scale and the end of the scale is different. So what I'm going to do is try to get this into the corner and try to make maybe enough copies that it fills the entire screen. Oops, now I want my start opacity to be 100, my end opacity to be 0. Positive above. There we go. So that's the repeater thing that's right there. There's also rounded corners. Obviously, we have rounded corners. We could also do things like twisting. So we can go into here and we could like twist the shapes if we wanted to create something a bit organic. Okay, and you can change where the center point is of that. You can delete these if you don't want that. You just click on the trim path or whatever and just delete it, and it goes away. So you can see where there's a lot of cool things you can do with just those very basic shape layers. Going here to new shape layer doesn't create an actual shape. All it does is create the layer, and then you'd have to come here and add shapes to it. On the shape layers themselves, you can have multiple shapes. So you can have like one shape like subtract another shape. So if you're trying to do like a gear, or you're trying to do like a circle with a hole in it or whatever, you can actually do that all within the same shape layer. So just as an example, there's one shape, and then I could create a circle there, and you'll see they're both on the same layer. And then I could just say subtract, where are you at? Stroke, fill, tangle. Merge paths. Subtract, there we go. So I subtracted the one from the other one, so now it's like cut out. Okay. I don't use that too often. Usually I'll draw the stuff out inside of Illustrator and then bring it in, but it's still a nice thing to have right there. All right, so what I want you to do today is I want you to work on creating 5 transitions, okay? Using like brand new ones. We've already gone through the process of how to do some basic ones. We've gone through the process of doing some more advanced ones, like the this is our fancy transition ones, right? That's a fancy one. That's our template, flipper, colorful, there it is. So we have a fancier one like this. So I want you to create 5 brand new transitions. And those 5 brand new transitions should be all the same stuff, okay? So they should have motion blur assigned to them, right, at the end. They should have the easy ease and some speed applied to them. And they should be different. I don't want them all to be the same thing. Think about different ways that you could interpret these kinds of things. So this one that comes across and then falls down, that's obviously different than this one that just falls down. I mean, they're similar, but not exactly the same. It's definitely not scaling each one, right? Like that one's a scale one. This was just a transition one. This was another transition one. So try to find 5 different ones. 2 of those I want to be with shape layers, and the other 3 can be just with the regular solids. Make sure you've chosen good colors. And then do one that has this too, okay? So you have 2 that are with shape layers, you have 3 that you can use with the regular solids, and one of them has to be something like this. Not this one exactly, but something like this, where it's pre-composed or composed into another composition, and then you're bringing it in and kind of duplicating that animation. It could be even those like spinning ones. This one here, like that. I could take this shape, circles, whatever it is, drop this onto the composition. There he is. And then I could scale him down to 33% or 34%. And then just move these over. Obviously, take another second to line them up correctly. Right? A little bit of offset. And then I could fill the entire screen with one of those to get, you know, the same kind of effect. Okay? There's a whole bunch of examples too. If you go to YouTube and you look up more page transitions, and by now you should be able to transitions. Come on. By now you should be able to look at some of these and be able to pick apart exactly how they did these. Okay, like this one here, that one here, that could be the same thing that we did for the, like I call it the Brady Bunch because you have the 6 blocks or 9 blocks. But it's just like one bar that comes out and it like scales up, right? So it comes out, scales up, and then it goes away. That's the same thing, except we had 9 boxes. This one only has 6, 5, 6. No, there is 6 one right here. Okay, so that does the same thing. Okay, so all of these things that you're seeing, not that one, you should be able to figure out how they were done and be able to do that kind of thing. So look for some that you like. Look for some that are obviously different than the ones you've already done before. Okay, then another thing that's kind of making these stand out a bit more, if we look at these later ones, like that one, you can really see it. Okay, what gives it maybe a little bit more depth to these is the fact that these aren't just solid colors. There's actually some drop shadow work going on. Like if you kind of look right here at the edge, looks like it's a little bit darker right there. So that's another thing that you could add to your stuff. So not to this one necessarily, but like my circle one. So that's not my circle one. There he is. All right. So my circle one here, let me reverse my order again, because it works better when you have it in this order. That we have stuff on top of each other. Okay. So what I can do is if I go to Effect, I go to Stylize, Drop Shadow. Nope. I'm just going to go to my effects. This effects and presets, if I didn't say it already, you can search for anything. So you just type in like I want a drop shadow. You don't have to say I want, you just pick drop shadow. And then it'll show you there's drop shadow, and then you can just drag it to your stuff. Okay? So it's much easier than trying to dig through these menus, especially when you get stuff like all these extra plugins. So you just type drop, and then somewhere inside this list, there's drop shadows under perspective. I was way off. So I just drag this right onto layer 5. And then if I look, there's now a little drop shadow around it. And so what it does, if I click little FX, it just adds a little bit of depth to it. So what I want to do is just kind of soften that a bit. Maybe take the distance down, maybe like 2. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe take the opacity down 2 to maybe like 20, 35. 35 is good. So now that I have a good one, I'm going to copy that. So I click on drop shadow and copy it, and then I can paste it to the other ones. So I just Control C, Control V, and that just gives me a little bit more depth on each one of these. Okay, without that, yeah, I only turned off the one. Without that, they'll have just a very stagnant look to them. So now we have this nice kind of looking piece with the drop shadow. But again, that could be applied to any of these. If I go back to this one, and I grab these and apply that same drop shadow, let me turn my motion blur off for a second. Yeah, here it maybe needs to be a little bit more pronounced. Let me undo my drop shadow adding. I'll add it to this one. I'll make it bigger or darker. Maybe make the distance bigger. And harden up a little bit. There we go. So now we have more of a drop shadow there. Okay, so that's another way that you can add a little bit of depth to your stuff just by adding in these nice little drop shadows, just to make your stuff feel a little bit more complete. Okay, now some of the stuff you may not actually know how to do, like in this one here that I'm going to click on. The same ones. This one has a bit more stuff, and this is the kind of stuff we're going to be covering in the next assignment. Oops. So like those little, like I call them blips. So with these little things like hit and there's like little lines that come out like that, you wouldn't know how to do those little blippy type things. Or these like 3D rotations. Those are things that we don't get into yet, but we will get into them. But some of the stuff like that little shape that they had there for that rounded shape, that's exactly the shape layer with just rounded edges. Okay, and they've made it so thin, and they've rounded those corners, and now they have these little bars that go across. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to go into After Effects, make a brand new project. So pretend I went to make a brand new project. That'll clear off all your stuff you have here, and then you're going to make your 5 transitions. So just as an example, let's pretend that I made my 5 transitions. What I want to do is I want to take my transitions after this, and I want to put them all into one composition. So just like we drug the one into here to drag it into a new comp, and it was like all on its own, I can drag 5 of these. So if I have, here's my yellow transition, here is my vertical transition, here is my 3rd page transition, my 4th page transition, here's my 1st, here's my combo rotation transition scale, here's my circles, cool. So that's obviously a lot more than 5. I take all these and drag them to the new comp, and I just say yes, just everything's cool, just hit OK. And now they're all inside this composition. So then what I can do is actually like put them together. So I'm going to take these ones and scoot them off. And I have this transition that comes in and goes like that. Then I want another transition to happen right after that one. So then I grab the next one. And now this one transitions. Cool. And then I want the next one. And then that one transitions. Cool. And then I want the next one. Okay. Now eventually I'm going to run out of space here because my composition is only so long. So I have to go up to my comp settings and make this like, I don't know, like 15 seconds. Okay. And I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm just going to keep playing it out until my transition's over. And then grabbing this and then scooting that one so that it starts. Then when it's over, I'm going to grab the next one. And then when that one's over, I'm going to grab the next one. What I don't want to happen is that we have like 5 minutes of extra space at the end of where I'm just staring at a blank screen or just a solid color. It should happen pretty quick, just like you saw in those other videos. So now when I hit play, now I get this nice little transition after transition after transition that shows here's all the transitions that I just did. Okay, so that's the assignment. That's what we're actually going to be turning in, plus an extra thing at the end. And then once the last one is done, okay, so I'm done with the red, I'm going to take this little bar and shrink it over, or I hit the N key to set my work area. And then I can say composition, trim my comp. And what it does is it cuts your composition to fit just what you have selected. And then I would obviously save it, and then I would be good to go. Okay? So work on your 5 transitions, add drop shadows, add motion blur where needed. Make sure you pick good colors, not like crazy colors like we talked about. Don't have 7,000 things like cycling for 1 page transition. That's like way too much. And then once you have all 5 of them, or more, maybe you have more because you wanted to add some more in there, then you can do this step of adding all of these together. Okay? Questions?
Is this like do that?
No. This will be due next week.